Absolutely.
That would be the Talkaoke upgrade. So have we do a Talkaoke comedy session? I mean, what was this comedy session that you guys were doing? Was it was it linked to Talkaoke, or was it an entirely new thing? As a person in the middle, I'm not only usually don't have any information, I have less information even then.
It's top secret, I'm afraid.
Oh, is it?
It is one of those top secret things.
We've got Richard has joined us as well. Welcome, Richard. Thank you for joining.
Hi, Rich.
Okay. Oh, you've got a round of applause.
The fans are here as well.
Richard's got a load of adoring fans. Brilliant, guys. Welcome to Talkaoke. It is a pop-up talk show where you guys are our VIPs. Today we're doing a bit like a souped-up Graham Norton show. You guys are all on Zoom. We're all excited to talk to you. Just remember to take yourself off mute when you want to speak. Keep your camera on so we can see your expressions. Do you agree with everyone in the room? Do you disagree? But first of all,
do you care at all?
Do you care at all? Got Mikey behind me. Maybe you don't care what the rest of the people are saying. If so, we want to know. So it's almost the end of March, guys. How are we feeling about that? What is on everyone's mind? As I said, I'm in the middle here. I have no opinions. I need you guys to bring the topics of conversation tonight. So what's on everyone's mind? What are we thinking
I am hoping, I'm looking forward to June when the restrictions will be lifted so we can get to normal, stable life back again and enjoy society.
Danny's excited about restrictions lifting so we can get back to normal society again. Are we going to be going back to normal society? What do people think? Is anyone not excited about coming back? I think Mikey behind me.
No, I'm super excited, but what is the society we're going to be walking into? Is it going to be the same? Is it going to be different?
So Mikey kind of throwing that out there. Dele?
I think we're going to become different entities because we will learn to respect each other more, we learn to love each other more, and we learn to cherish each other more in a very positive manner. The pandemic has taught us a great lesson, and we should abide by that and make use of all those opportunities that will come to us when the restrictions are lifted.
Okay, brilliant. So Dele, you're quite optimistic. You think when the restrictions are lifted, we've kind of learned to be respectful, to think of each other a lot more. Do people in the room agree? I think, is that Victoria? Have you got your hand up? And am I pronouncing your name correctly? That's very important as well.
It's just Victoria.
Great, good to know. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, my opinion is something like simple. It's going to be different every time something changes. It's just next thing is different, and like clearly society, I guess specifically in this country, society is constantly reinventing itself. So yeah, it's just what is normal is another question. It's just going to be different.
Okay, so what is normal? What is just going to be different? Is it going to be good different or bad different? Steve?
Well, we're not even there yet. I just hope we don't blow it, that's all. We could get there, but we could ruin it with our own stupidity. And wrangling about who owns what vaccine, and we could screw it up. We could still screw it up. We don't want to, but we could.
Yeah, I mean, for anyone who hasn't sort of seen those that stuff that's going on, can you explain a bit more about what you mean about the messing it up and the stuff about the vaccines?
I don't know because I don't understand it. Cause it doesn't interest me. It interests me in far as the outcome goes, but I don't understand the economics of it. I'm just talking about the various countries restricting, export of vaccines and things like that. And then the media makes so much of it. They throw up so much doubt. Like, there's a little bit of doubt about one of the vaccines, and they just love a bad news story. So it comes out in everyone's mind. Is it effective? Is it dangerous? And all that crap.
The media loves a bad news story, especially about vaccines. Margot, you've got something that you want to chime in on this.
I wanted to just kind of say, because I think there's a couple of completely brand new faces to Talkaoke table, and I wondered whether we could just give a little rundown of what is this madness? What are we doing
give them a round of applause before we do it.
Yeah, okay, brilliant. Round of applause from Natalie. Thank you, Natalie, who's on the sound desk tonight.
She's got like 25 pairs of hands.
Exactly. So welcome. It's exciting. We've got some new people to Talkaoke. I'm just trying to admit someone into the waiting room, but maybe my computer's not allowing me. So welcome to Talkaoke. This is a pop-up talk show, and you guys, everyone on Zoom tonight, you guys are VIP. So we're here to talk about whatever you guys want. So at the moment, we've had Steve talking about vaccines and the kind of the politicization of vaccines. You know, sometimes we talk about robots, sometimes we talk about what's been in the news, or just how you guys are feeling. And I think that's kind of like the top line message of Talkaoke. I think Mikey, who is its curator over there, we'll give him a round of applause. I'm going to lean to him to see if there's any other important messages I need to give to people.
No. I just wanted to join in on the chat, to be honest. I mean, the thing is about Evie in the middle, that you get to be in the middle, but it means you're not allowed any opinions or to give any facts or anything. So for me, as the inventor of Talkaoke, it's much more fun to be on the outside where I can just rant away or whatever I want to say, and I don't have to be neutral. And that brings me on to my point, which is I was absolutely astounded at Boris Johnson's announcement that it was greed what done it. It was greed. Greed is what created this vaccine. And if it wasn't for, he said if it wasn't for greed, we wouldn't have this vaccine. But it doesn't make any sense to me. It's like, it's almost like, you know, it's same as like he's kind of taking the credit for people surviving and not taking blame for people that didn't survive.
Okay, brilliant. So I think that's maybe got a few points sparked up around the table. I've got Victoria in the Zoom chat, and then we're going to go to Zoe, I reckon. So Victoria, if you go first.
I really just, it's not going to be related to what Mikey said, but you don't have to. This is a very minor thing where you can go back to the topic. It's just that, has anyone seen this news about volcanic eruption in Iceland?
No.
So it's really hilarious because people are like baking eggs and stuff, making omelette, and there are lots of people just like watching it. Just check it out. Looks extremely beautiful and like also like a video game, and it's really hilarious. Sorry.
No, I think it's a good thing to bring to the table. So I wanted Zoe. I did promise I'd go back to you, Ian, quickly.
Sorry, on that subject, Mount Etna has exploded again. In is it Sicily or somewhere around there? The one that actually swamped Pompeii, I believe. So there's a bit of old news, and an old volcano coming up again, erupting.
It wasn't mine.
So could it be
sorry.
like the plague that before the world ended? You know, we've had the plague of the plague. Now we're going to have the earth erupting, all this sort of stuff. Next thing, it'd be raining frogs, I think. So take your umbrella out tomorrow.
You heard it here first. Thank you, Ian. So maybe what we're about to experience is just some starting signs of the apocalypse. I'm going to go to Zoe in the studio. Zoe, have you got something that you wanted to share?
Well, it's interesting Ian said that about the plagues. It's actually coming up to Passover, which is the Jewish holiday, you know, where escaped from slavery in Egypt. And the whole point of that was that there were 10 plagues that God apparently sent down on the Egyptians. And one of them was frogs. So Ian's right there. One of them, I think the river turned to blood, which does not sound good. I don't think a volcano was part of that, but maybe somewhere a volcano erupted. But
it's a kind of river of lava, which is red, same color.
Yeah. So, I mean, I remember last Passover thinking, there's no way this Passover will still be in this plague, but here we are. And now Ian's saying there are more plagues coming. I don't know. I'd like to be more optimistic than that, but I can see where Ian's coming from for sure.
Okay, brilliant. So some people are agreeing. Oh, Ian, yes.
I woke up this morning and there was 4 horsemen outside in the road. But it's not the end of the world, is it?
Well, is it the end of the world? Have we got maybe some new people? Oh, we've just got some things falling off in the studio. So
were they wearing yellow jackets?
Mikey wants to know whether they were wearing yellow jackets. Where are we going to go? I want to bring some new people in who haven't maybe talked so far. You know, do you guys agree it's the end of the world? Are you excited about restrictions lifting? Do you think we will go back to normal? Do you want to talk about volcanoes? It can go anywhere, guys. So maybe let's hear from someone we haven't heard from yet tonight. Take the plunge.
Hello, everyone.
Hello,
Hey.
hello. Is that Andre?
Yeah, it's Andre, that's right.
Welcome, Andre.
Thank you. I had recently COVID, and I had a really bad cough, and what helped me was raw garlic. It's a natural remedy. Raw garlic really helped me against the cough that I had.
What about it really helped, did you think? Like, did you feel like it was just like decongesting you? Did you just feel like it made you feel more awake?
It wasn't immediate, but the same day that I took it, the cough was away.
And how are you feeling now, importantly?
Fantastic.
That's good to know. That's good to know. That's what we like to hear. Okay, so you've got Andre who's got he wants to share that experience. Oh,
What was that?
I think someone just kind of come into the chat. Possibly your microphone was going a bit funny or something.
It could be the aliens.
Or it could be the aliens again. Maybe it's another sign. Perhaps it's the next plague, exactly. All right, okay, so yeah, does anyone got anything to add on Andre's kind of suggestions of like adding some natural remedies to try to cure yourself? Have we got some ideas about, what we're going to do after lockdown? Vaccine, political fights. I've got Mikey behind me.
Well, it just reminds me of something that I saw on Facebook, sadly, which was there was like two guys holding up signs, and one says, "The end of the world is nigh." And the other one held up a sign saying, "This will go on forever." And the one saying the end of the world was nigh is going, "I hate you fucking optimists."
Okay, so they've got a few chuckles. I've got a few chuckles from there. Not everyone. Katie says it might have been my wall. So, Katie, would you say that you were an optimist or a pessimist in this situation?
A realist.
Oh, or a realist, says Margot.
Absolutely an optimist.
Absolutely an optimist. Why?
Well, everything ends sooner or later.
Including us.
Including us, so yeah.
Okay, so we've come off with quite a nihilist start, I would say. So where are we going to go from here, guys? I mean, we've got Mikey behind me?
Just reminds me of a German saying, which is "Alles hat ein Ende, nur die Wurst hat zwei," which means
sausage has two.
Everything. Thanks for ruining my punchline, Margaret. Everything has an end, only the sausage has two.
Only and they are quite delicious. Victoria, that seemed to pique her interest.
Yes, I guess so. I guess it's actually it made me think of this interview or lecture I was listening to, because there was a film critic, and he was saying how it was actually possible in 60s, 20th century, in 60s, to be able to see all the cinema that existed at the time. And at the moment, clearly it would be impossible to see all the films that have been released to this day. And it would take you longer than your lifetime, and you would only have to if you just clearly watched just films and didn't eat and sleep. I guess same goes to music and other sort of pieces of art or entertainment. And I feel like there's something about it. I don't know. I've just been thinking about it because I wonder what it's going to be like going forward. Because the more music there is, the more films there are, the less it's possible to watch. The less of it is going to be seen, essentially. And I don't know. I'm wondering because I was just thinking about how will it evolve? Because there has been obviously democratization of different art forms, but how is it going to go further? Is it, just giving some thoughts.
Oh, I like them. They're quite, I think we've got Margot. I want to give all my opinions on that, but obviously as a person in the middle, I can't. So if that kind of really massive existential statement about all the film in the world not being possible to see, interested you, take yourself on mute, put your hand up. I'm going to go to Margot first because she has a point that she wanted to make.
Just to sort of like cut people off if they start saying the same thing again.
Okay.
Because they tend to say the same thing again and again.
I'm scared of the apocalypse, but I was always quite baffled by how my mum took it all very, very seriously. And I remember, I just got these like little glimpses of things that my mum said to me. One of them being, Natalie, your mic is on. That's one of the things that my mum said. That's Katie on the chat letting me know your mic is on. But secondly, my mum always used to say like, oh, you know, the plagues. I wonder, you know, what I wonder what's going to come next. And apparently, like when the HIV epidemic, the AIDS epidemic was kind of happening, my mum was saying to me, oh, I think it may be one of the new, you know, plagues type of thing, you know, plaguing us people. But I kind of wonder, are people scared of anything? Is there something that could happen in the world now? They would be like, fuck, this is really serious. This would be like really terrifying. Or are we like, well, whatever comes, and just get with the program. Everyone's going to like move on and die anyway. I'm just curious.
What are people existentially scared of? Maybe, yeah. So we've had these things that have happened to us in the past and today. I'm going to go to Ian because we haven't heard from you. And if anyone new wants to put their hand up as well, let us know. But we're going over to Ian first.
Yeah, I don't want to be hit by a truck.
Don't want to be hit by a truck. Why a truck specifically? I find that
very soul destroying. It would alter my concept of life and probably make a mess at the same time. So yeah. There you go.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ian. We've also got Lewis. Would you like to add on to that? Hello, Lewis. Welcome to Talkaoke. If you take yourself on mute and share with us your thoughts. A round of applause for you there.
Me? Probably that's just in and of itself is what I'm scared of, probably. So yeah.
Just as the whole concept.
Yeah. Nothing in particular.
I think that's quite a fair one to have, to be fair. I mean, does anyone disagree? Agree? I've got Katie's got their hand up, but Katie next.
Thank you. In regards to, I will try to quickly answer a few questions because really some are very interesting. In regards to what happens to the music and movies that we can't watch, the answer would be, which has already started, is there will be computer curated libraries which will monitor what we like and help us choose the movies and such which we would enjoy or which would surprise us or whatever. But it will be kind of artificial intelligence curation of the information. There are already online curations of various designs, art, and so on. So it will just drift to movies and music. I mean, Spotify playlist is a good example of the beginning of the process. In regards to what happens after pandemic, I think the best example is 1918 flu pandemic. Which happened in a similar kind of time period and ended up with economically roaring 20s. So this is at least what data analysts, as far as I know, expect. So most likely next 10 years will be best in this century. As I'm very scared of, I recently heard in the news about global coffee shortage. And that's pretty much the scariest news in a couple of years for me.
Okay, great. So that we've got three great things there. We've got a coffee shortage just thrown in there at the end. We've got AI solutions to just the sheer amount of content we have in our lives. And we have a third thing, but I've forgotten. But Lewis has been very patiently got his hand up. Lewis Bryan. So can we go to you, Lewis, if that's all right?
Can you hear me? Is the question? Can you even hear me?
You're very quiet. But we can.
What about now? Is that any better? How about that?
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Right. Here then. Wonderful. So we're asking what we're most scared of. I saw a film called The Man Who Saved the World. Has anyone seen that? And it's about a Russian guy who got an alert in the nuclear station to say that there were 5 American missiles on the way during the Cuban Missile Crisis. And they nearly responded, but they did not. So any day there could be a slight error, and that could be it. So that's what scares me.
Fair enough. That's brilliant. Thank you, Lewis. I think that's quite a good point. You made Zoe in the studio react quite excitedly to that, so we're going to go to Zoe.
Well, I don't know. This kind of tied into what scared me, which was that this sense of like AI and technology deciding what movies I like, or deciding like whether or not to launch these bombs or something. That freaks me out because I already feel like I don't have enough agency over what I do in my own like brain and body. Like the kind of conversation that's happening there, you know, kind of freaks me out. So then to think about this external like AI robot deciding for me what I should listen to and watch, that is terrifying. Like, I would like to decide that for myself, please. And then, you know, maybe human error and like, you know, all these nuclear bombs, maybe that happens, but do we want to trust the AI people like to do that for us? I don't know. That freaks me out.
Brilliant. Thank you, Zoe. Richard, we're going to go over to you now. You've got an answer to Zoe's fear?
No, not an answer. Am I feeding back?
We can hear you, yes.
Okay, cool. No, I think even before technology was involved, there's always been an element of things being curated, and you know, what becomes popular media is decided by a smaller group of people than would necessarily reflect the entire population, and that comes down to a variety of many different issues. You know, what religion is predominant in the country that you live in dictates what films are promoted and what's seen as art and what's not seen as valuable to society. You know, I think it's there's I was more sort of picking up on the point that she made about things being out of our control, and actually they are to a certain to a greater degree. And to bring it back to what Mikey said about greed and the vaccine, the fact that this vaccine was developed so quickly is all because of the fact that it was needed, and whichever company made it first would make the most money out of it, right? So even that was out of control. You know, there haven't been new antipsychotic drugs developed because there's no money in it, because they can't be patented. But as soon as there was a problem which had a solution which was monetizable, that became the main focus. And again, that was outside of all of our control. That just came from this virus coming about. Sorry, I just tried to amalgamate things.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Richard. So that's got some good points there. So, you know, it may be in response to Zoe's fears about AI. Actually, there are so many other forces controlling us anyway. Controlling us? Who knows? Maybe I'm putting words in your mouth there. Ian, you've got a point.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you just said about when Boris is talking about greed doing this, that's exactly what he means. They want to paint it as a triumph of capitalism. I mean, the NHS, totally underfunded, totally taken out the equation. Dominic Cummings said this the other day, that it was like a smouldering wreck and they had to take it away from them. So yeah, they want to paint it as the victory of greed. Going back to the Thatcherite thing, as there's no such thing as society, and the 80s where greed was seen as a badge of honor. But yeah, I think that the thing about films as well, part of the pleasure I have in watching films is by discovering a new film that I've never seen before in a totally different genre and enjoying it. So that will never be taken away from me. I don't usually watch what Facebook tells me to watch because it thinks I might like it. But yeah, I mean, I also think that people are a bit more intelligent than to, yeah, the mass media does direct us in certain ways, but the media is losing a lot of its power because of things like the internet. And I think people are in a position to make their own minds up. The thing is, how do we go about implementing what people's minds have made up to? So yeah, this next year or so is going to be very interesting. Lots of people have said that all bets are off and it's going to be a different society. And I think that there's room for progressive people to make it a better society.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ian. Leaving us on quite an uplifting note there. Lewis, you've had your hand up, and then I'm going to go to Victoria as well. But Lewis, Brian, you've been very patient. So,
okay, so
come in.
just in reply to the point there that was made, the media is losing a lot of power, but it's been replaced by social media, which is unregulated. If you've watched a film called The Social Dilemma, which I did a few weeks ago, you can see how unpredictable and dangerous that can actually be. It's a really interesting film, and I recommend it, about how we're addicted to likes and notifications, and we can't let go of this thing now that's in our hand. We're always checking it, and it's actually designed for us to continually do that.
Brilliant, thank you, Lewis. I'm going to go straight to Victoria. If you've got some points to feed in on that, or your own points as well.
Yeah, I think it's well, I guess in terms of AI and all these technologies, I guess I'm not too scared of them because to me, it's just patterns of human behavior. So, you know, it's a choice. Like, we don't have to use them at the end of the day if they don't want to. So that's okay. But in general, I think I also like this idea, you know, about what are we afraid of. I quite like the, you know, answering this question, what are we afraid of in general. I feel like I really like this idea of how the humans are generally afraid of change, and in the same time, if you think about it, change is like the main. Actually, it's the thing that life consists of. Like, life always changing, and it's like that's the basic of it. That's the basic kind of structure of it. Or like things are always changing. We just never know what's going to happen ever, and so it's like. You can't avoid change, but also it's like one of those things we are most afraid of. So I always find quite fascinating. But I think it's because, for instance, when I went freelance is when I realized it the most, because you truly just don't know. Like, you don't have this idea of the idea of stability in freelance. It can be there, but it's just a different approach. You have to change your mindset in many ways in comparison when you have a full-time job, for example.
Brilliant, thank you. So, yeah, I mean, the only thing that humans are afraid of, or not the only thing, one of the things that humans are afraid of is change. Richard, I'm going to go to you.
Hi, yeah, I'd just like to support that point. There's a phrase that I'd use to sum it up, but it came about because me and 3 of my friends in a job I used to play a game during our team meetings where we'd try to get the most ridiculous sounding business speak into the meeting and then all back each other up as if we just said something profound. And my phrase, which, like I said, unfortunately seems to be slightly more profound than I ever meant it to be, was change is just a narrow view of continuality.
Whoa.
But yeah, that was it. But that literally came from trying to make a mockery of team meetings.
So how do you feel about your creation now? Is it out in the world?
No. Well, it's now out into this little bit of the world. So do feel free to use that as you will.
Sorry, what do you mean by narrow exactly?
Well, if the idea is that if you look at a short period of time, then whatever you see out, whatever happens next will always be a change. If you look at a wider period of time, there's more consistency. So it's essentially just saying change is just a perspective that you have. But yeah, it was supposed to be amusing.
Supposed to be amusing. Is it actually profound? What do we think? We have a whole panel of people in front of us today. It's out in the world now, Richard. I'm afraid you can't decide on it. Our panel of Talkaoke guests are now going to be the ones to decide on it. Mikey being the first person.
I think we don't like change as creatures of habit, but I think there's 2 types of change, and the one is a change that we're part of, that we feel that we're part of, either, you know, part of that decision or actually pushing it ourselves. And there's a change that is put upon us. A lot of the natural change, like COVID, was a change that we definitely were not a part of. Sometimes if we're pushing the change, we feel differently about change. We feel like it's making a difference, it's new and it's better. So I think the message here is just to involve people in that sense of change, and that they are part of the change, not part of the, not part of the people that are pushed against.
Okay, brilliant. So we've got Mikey, that people can easier accept change if they're kind of involved in the process. We had Ian was talking about earlier about the fact that we're going to be prepared for a lot of change potentially after this. Where are we going to go? I've got Victoria, you've got a hand up. Oh, and then we'll go to Laura Kay, who's also put her hand up. Victoria first.
That was quick. I think it's almost what Mikey said. Almost kind of makes me think of this idea of history repeating itself, or whether are we really like, can we actually, let's say we know what happened 100 years ago. Can we actually change what's going to happen, or can we actually prepare what's going to happen in the future because we know the history? But I think that's not. I think basically I disagree with it. I don't think I agree with this idea that history repeats itself, because we just don't know what's going to happen. I was just listening to some interview. I mean, this is not. I can't really give a reference, but the guy was saying that there was a guy he's doing like a research into like different periods of time, and he was saying like, yes, maybe there are periods in life when certain actions happen at the same time in different countries, but usually they're not really connected anyway. I know this sounds very abstract, but I guess my thesis is like, still you can't really still control the future anyway, because history doesn't repeat itself. That would be the thesis.
I like it. So history doesn't repeat itself because we still don't know what's going to happen. So we can't be certain about that. And then I think
it's kind of the question of responsibility almost.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm a bit like losing myself.
No worries. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Laura Kay, who also had a point. I think did you agree with Richard? Did you agree with Mikey? Do you disagree with both? Welcome to the Talkaoke table.
So what Victoria was saying about history not repeating itself, I mean, obviously it's not going to repeat itself completely, but I think there is something very comforting in patterns that we know, and we can kind of predict things and learn from past mistakes for the future similar situations. So I actually wanted to talk about change because for me, there was a time in my life when I was very afraid of changes and like anything changing in my life. I was very much in my comfort zone, and then I completely switched, and now I find my comfort in the change, because I feel like whatever bad is happening, I know it will pass at some point. With good things as well, it makes me appreciate them more. So I think there is like actually it's a very comforting idea when you really think about it. So I just wanted to point that out.
Brilliant. Thank you, Laura. So we've got actually maybe the concept of change is actually quite comforting. You can learn from your mistakes. You can move on. I'm going to go for Ian has got his hand up.
Yeah. Speaking as an older person, I don't want to live forever. And the reason I don't want to live forever is if we see history as a circle, completely, going round and around, repeating itself, I kind of see life at the moment as a whirlpool in which it starts off slow at the edges and gets faster and faster and faster. I've seen so many changes in my life that I find it uncomfortable, the pace of change. I find it very uncomfortable. That's because I'm a creature of my times. And it worries me that sooner or later this whirlpool will get so quick that there won't be a time that you can call your own, because it will be forever changing. And you can imagine, I've come from the pre-computer days, black and white TVs, outside toilets, that kind of thing. I'm not pushing it, but and so change now, and I find it harder to come to terms with things like mobile phones. I'm useless at. And if it went on any further, if I did live forever, I would not be able to adapt to the speed of change, because it's not been that pace before. And that kind of scares me.
Okay, brilliant. So yeah, like there's quite a lot of different perspectives in the room about change. Margot, you've got your hand up.
I've got a question. Do you think that people who are, if you say that maybe you're a person of a certain age and therefore you don't like change, do you think that people, when you were young, people just didn't go through as many changes as people do now? Or is it more like, look, I'm this age now, I don't like change. Maybe ask me 20 years ago, maybe I would have been up for it, but now yeah. So is it a generation thing or is it age thing? Basically, the question.
Over to you, Ian.
Is it a generational thing or is it ageism? Sorry, I didn't hear that last bit.
Is it a generation thing? So do you think if it's just or actually, Margot, I've now lost my train of thought.
I think it is. I think it's being comfortable in the time you're from, and and I'd also bring in another word in there. We talk about change. Are we actually talking about progress? You know, because we could change. We need to change in a way that, brings back the equilibrium of the earth. You know, the things we've done and accelerated things. So perhaps change will be going back to a more simple lifestyle. Perhaps that's progress in reverse, or is it progress in a different direction? I don't know. But yeah, I am very comfortable in my time, and I'm an older person, so my prime is probably behind me. I'm not looking for sympathy here. I intend to live forever or die trying, so yeah. I mean, I just find it very hard to come to terms with the pace of change because it challenges all my known, things that I lean on in my life.
Brilliant, thank you, Ian. So I've got Katie, you've got your hand up as well. So we've been talking about change. Is it good? Is it bad? Is the pace of change changing? Are we progressing when we change?
Yeah. Before I come back to that, just to continue on the topic of the change of the pace of change. A lot of data analysis has been done on this topic, like a whole ton of it. And scientists found that the speed at which the progress is moving forward, let's say new inventions happen and our lifestyle changes and so on, is doubling every 2 to 3 years nowadays. The speed at which it happens. So, and for us humans, due to our evolution and surroundings where we lived, we have no clue how to imagine exponential progression. So I found one amazing example. Imagine a person starts saving money with 1 penny and doubles the amount every day. So first day it's 1 penny, second day it's 2 pence, then 4 pence, 8 pence. By the day 38, one would have to bring in £2 billion.
Great.
In just 38 days, just by doubling a single penny. So when we talk about exponential, so when we go with this exponential progression, I think I feel much younger, but at the same time, I'm struggling. I have recently even told my parents that my new goal of life is, before I'm dead, reach the level of that time's 16-year-old. Because 16-year-olds of today are way smarter in so many things than I am, even though at my age, when I was 16, I was considered half genius at school. So the pace at which it's changing is incredible, and we just can't handle. I think I'm struggling as well. I think it's the kind of a symptom of the current time we live in. And to answer whether it's good or bad, I'm an optimist, so maybe that's the reason why I think it's good, because according to the same, just like in 38 days, one reaches 2 billion, they calculated that in about 25 to 40 years, we should reach a speed of development where we get 10 Nobel Prize discoveries and inventions every second.
Okay, I'm going to pause. There are so many facts there, and I want to talk about pretty much all of them there. Well, I can't, but maybe you guys do. Victoria's waving, and I think she might explode, so we're going to go to her now.
Yes, because I feel like I want to point out something that both Ian and Katie mentioned, because I've noticed recently that a lot of my friends start talking about aging. Like, I'm 27 now, and I have some friends that are 30 or 25 or 40, different ages. And I've noticed how a lot of people just get worried about aging, or even very, very young people say that, oh, you know, when I was younger, or I'm already 30, blah, 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 stuff like that. And I've realized that I have like a very different feeling about aging. Because actually I'm actually much more excited about aging, because I feel like I'm becoming more myself with age. And for me, and I think, and when Ian said like, oh, you know, I'm from that time, or I'm like, he said something about owning the time. I think that's how I understood. And you know, like, can you own time, or can you maybe just own yourself? You know, because I feel like, you know, if you look at some really great bands, like is an example of music. Let's say Radiohead has been like around for so long, but they but they just keep their core. They keep themselves to themselves, and no matter how time changes, they always like, you know, their new music comes out, and it's still them, but it's also very fresh. Still sounds very fresh, and for me, it's like it's more about, you know, I don't really care how, like, for example, you know, are people younger, like, are young people today, are they much smarter than we were as a kids? Like, how do you compare that? How do you measure that? You know, how, like, because clearly I would imagine, you know, growing up in such a technological age, I mean, there might be chances it's harder to like learn some emotional skills, or who knows, like, but not necessarily, you know, but my point is, like, for me, yes, it's about things change, life change, times change, pace change, but I feel like as long as you keep yourself as who you are, then you will always have that constant thing. So yeah.
Brilliant. So we've got, you know, maybe are 16-year-olds smarter? Are they just smarter at different things? Maybe they, you know, there's constant change. There's loads to unpack there. And Andre, you have got your hand up. So can we go to you next?
Yeah, sure. I wanted to talk about the doomsday clock.
Mm-hmm.
It's a measure from 1974, and it shows the probability of destruction of human race. And at the moment, it's worse in the history since 1974.
Well, right now, it's at its worst in history.
Yeah, and right now it's worse in history. It's 100 seconds to midnight, which never happened in the history. And
who do you know who decides? You know, where the second hand is going?
It's a group of scientists.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Andre's just sort of dropped that truth bomb into the chat. What do people think? We've got a few people we haven't heard from yet. So if that has spurred you into thinking, yes, I need to share my thoughts to the Talkaoke table, this will be a great time to pop in. If not, I'm going to go to Mikey behind me, but just let that percolate in your mind for now. Well, Mikey.
Everyone on this session is older now than they've ever been. They're closer to their death than they've ever been. So that is just the nature of life and death, and I think that's something we need to grasp. You know, my feeling about it is that some things don't change. There's something about human nature. Does love change? Does the pace of life change? For, you know, the waking hours change? These things are all we can't really change these things.
Okay, brilliant. So, you know, we're going to have a reflection of time, love, change. Ian.
I was looking at something by an interview with Christopher Hitchens, who was a kind of hero of mine, and he was dying of cancer. And at the end of the interview, they said to him, "How are you?" And he said, "Well, I'm still dying, but then again, so are you."
Okay, so we've got quite like maybe we're seeming to be in agreement. I think that's definitely seemed to amuse Reese, I think. Hello, welcome. And we've got welcome John as well. You've either turned on your videos or you're just new to the chat, so welcome. Where are we going to go from here, guys? We've got Margot, that's where we're going to go.
Something that Victoria said that made me think about how do we know that people these days, or young people these days, are more intelligent or more clever or more, they're better, more knowledgeable than we were back when we were their age. I kind of wonder, like, what is that based on? And also, are the young people now kind of, filling their minds with things which are just a different kind of knowledge, and is that knowledge the same kind of knowledge? What I mean by that is that, for instance, last night I couldn't stop myself. I watched 3 episodes, stayed up till 2 a.m. watching We Are Who We Are. Has anyone seen it?
Yeah.
We've got an excited yes from the sounder.
It's so good.
Let me try to explain. Anyway, there's like about this young boy who's 14 and another girl who's also 14, and they kind of grow up in a American military base in Italy, and the whole there's a lot going on there. There's a lot. Oh, hi, Yaroslav. There's a lot going on there. But essentially, these two kids, they almost are in their own world, because the things they talk about is like gender identity, the world, of that kind of fitting in, and that's being given, that is almost like the main kind of chunk in subtle ways. It's very, very nuanced and really beautiful. But this is like, the kids kind of preoccupy themselves with that, the identity. Now, I don't think I spend a lot of time in a similar way when I was back then thinking about identity. Maybe that's wrong, or maybe I should have, or I could have. Or is it just like, you could be thinking about identity, but you could also be learning and stop being a spoiled brat and actually do something constructive for the society. So what kind of things, I don't know what my question is, but yeah.
Yeah, what do people think? I'm going to go to Zoe first, and then I'm going to go. I've got a few hands up, so I'm going to go to Zoe because we haven't heard from her for a while.
I guess I think my first reaction to that is that I feel inspired by that, and I'm a little jealous. Like, I wish that I had spent more time in a really selfish way thinking about myself and my own identity when I was growing up, because I feel like maybe, and I don't know because I didn't do it, right? But maybe it equips you better for this kind of change that is progressing so quickly. Maybe if you know yourself, you're able to kind of either be a part of that change or to accept that change, because I think, as Victoria was maybe saying, that like you yourself always kind of stay constant. And so if you have that sense of identity, if you have that kind of self-awareness, I would bet it kind of gives you more tools to kind of to approach that change in an easier way. I don't know. That was my first instinct, and that I felt really jealous of these kids, that I really wish that my childhood had been much more about my own identity.
Okay, so if you sort of really understand yourself and know yourself, then you are better able to like cope with change, live through change, maybe just thrive through change. I've got Katie, and then I've got Victoria. I want to go to Laura Kate, lots of people, but Katie first.
Sorry, I'll try to be quick. I analyzed my identity as a child a ton, and I can tell one thing: it has changed so many times that I wouldn't even bother counting. As for the way the intelligence is measured, well, I look for pattern recognition and various skills, coordination, reaction time, and such. Pretty much the reason why, let's say, Olympic records, if you look at Olympic records, let's say 50 years ago, they look like nothing compared to nowadays, even though humans stayed humans, right? I mean, evolution doesn't happen in 50 years, yet the results are so much higher. So every new generation, they feel they have to push themselves higher, and that's where they achieve more, faster, quicker, and so on.
Brilliant. Thank you, Katie. I'm going to hold you there. I think that was a really good point to end on, and then we're going to go to Victoria. Anyone else who wants to respond to those ideas? We've got George, welcome. We've got Paul, Yaroslav, welcome. Jennifer, hello. If you guys want to chime in at any point, pop your hand, pop your screen on, but let's go to Victoria.
Yeah, I'll try to also be quick. Yeah, I think it's just wanted to, actually Katie made like a good point. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about this education moment, because recently, because, we're just discussing like, oh, are kids smarter these days? And, what are they learning? And I think Margot mentioned something like, what are they learning? And it kind of made me think about this podcast I was listening to recently. And the topic of the podcast was enlightenment and what that means today. And I thought it was they had such a brilliant like analogy of first of all, they said something like, well, there was an example of somewhere in a city, in some city, let's say in Russia, there was, two parents had a child, and the child was diagnosed with cancer. And there was a woman in that same block of flat that said, could you please ask them to move their child, because I think his disease, he can spread his disease. And she knew it was cancer. And then they were like, okay. And this woman wasn't, she was like a physics teacher or something. And that kind of brought up the question of enlightenment and like what that actually means. Because a lot of times, people read things, and then it turns out to be that Earth is flat. And is that valuable, the things that you're reading are, is that actually has any scientific base, or you just, and what is an expert? What is an expert today? Or, are, just because like you are talking to the audience, are you becoming an expert instantly?
Okay, so there's some questions about expertise, got some questions about, about young people.
And generally, and what is to be enlightened? Like, is it just education, or is it just, or is there a humanitarian factor involved, or empathy? And it's just, so, a lot of today, it's almost like we talk about vaccines the way is almost the same way we talk about religion, like this, it's like, oh, you can get in and you go into one group of people, and you say you don't want to vaccinate, and then they'll praise you. And you go to another group of people and you say you don't want to vaccinate, and they'll like don't really get you. It's an interesting how it's supposed to be a very certain thing, right? Like vaccination, but it isn't, because of this, like it isn't because the knowledge today is so like there is this sense of like, oh, anyone can read anything and will doubt it, like.
Brilliant, thank you. Laura, you had some points earlier. Well, I mean, are they about young people? Are you yourself a young person that you want to respond to? Do you want to respond to this Victoria's points about sort of enlightenment and the perception of science?
Yes, well, I wanted to talk about young people. Well, I do consider myself a young person still, but I do have a younger sister who's 19, so I do have some insight into how teenagers' life looks like right now, I guess. But I was actually talking about it to my friend yesterday, how actually the younger generation now is, evolving, and what is kind of, it might seem like something negative at first, because a lot of them seem very arrogant, but I would call it more like a cheeky and bold, and actually is not afraid to question a lot of stereotypes that now are like, we can see the perception of people changing, which I think is so crucial and important, and is happening right now for us, like as an adults now. I guess we can learn from them a lot, and then kind of sieve it a little bit and guide them maybe, but still I think now that's the change that we are maybe afraid of a lot, that we can actually learn from younger people, which is a little bit like, doesn't make sense to, like, it's not really how it should work, like we should be older, we should be wiser, but actually it goes the other way around. So I think it's really interesting point to talk about.
Richard, do you agree? Do you think, thank you, a round of applause from Natalie from you there as well, thank you. Richard, do you agree about these, are you yourself a young person? Do you think you can learn from new things from young people? Are you worried about how people's thoughts are changing?
I'm not worried about how things are changing, and I think we can clearly see I'm not a young person, but I'll say that. But I suppose one of the things I wanted to pull up here was the idea of, we're using two terms sort of interchangeably, change and progress. And progress implies a forward movement. Now, positivity and forward movement all depends on the perspective of how you're measuring that. By way of, for instance, there was a mass study done on the differences in anxiety and depression between biological genders, right? And across the globe, in almost all communities, it was found that females tended to have a higher instance of anxiety and depression, except for one subculture, which was the Amish. And the weird thing was, it was something to do with the fact that because the Amish had a very insular community, if one person seemed to be sad or worried, everyone would rally around to support that person. But what I suppose, I'm not suggesting either argument is right. I'm not trying to like question people's identities or how our society should be. I'm just saying, like, it's quite interesting that if you measured it solely on that point, you would say, right, we should all be like the Amish, in which case we wouldn't be having this conversation now.
Should we all be like the Amish? Mikey?
Well, that sort of reminds me of when I was in Zanzibar, and I was getting friendly with the villagers, and they invited me to an exorcism. And that sounds like something like really, you know, like we've all seen the film, most of us have seen the film The Exorcist, but it wasn't like that at all. The exorcism in Tanzania was all about all the people in the village getting around and supporting this one person that had some kind of mental health issue, and actually kind of being present and sort of say, it was like all these dances, and she was at the kind of the center of this, but it was a very beautiful ceremony, which was all about, as you say, supporting this one person and that village saying, look, we're here for you. And I found that really interesting. And I think, you know, it goes on to, I think the point I wanted to make earlier was, I think one thing, when it comes to intelligence, you talk about things like the Enlightenment, and that's a kind of rational intelligence, but I think we are progressing in terms of an emotional intelligence. And I think that example in Zanzibar is a kind of example of emotional intelligence.
Okay, so talk about progress, we're talking about emotional intelligence, we're talking about different ways that maybe people try and help each other. Ian?
Yeah, the one thing that I took from university is that everything is an opinion. And I found that as a working class lad at university, I found that the thing that happens with people that are used to higher education, perhaps come from other classes, middle class, upper class, I think that they're bred with the confidence to bring their ideas out. So it's usually their ideas that shape the agenda for the future. And without that confidence of knowing that your ideas are just as sound and just as viable as other people's ideas, you're really destined to be not heard. And I think that's the fate of most people. They think this is an expert they must talk about. I must say about Amish, I'm going to tell a joke, okay? Why was the Amish woman thrown out of church?
I don't know.
Too Mennonite.
I think I get it. I think I get it. We need to... You might be faster than me. Oh no, look, there are some smiles going on in the chat, so that's good.
Sorry about that, but it's the only Amish gag I know.
And now it's out there for the world, so... Stephen, and I hear that you've got to go. So before you go, thank you very much for attending, first of all. But secondly, can you leave us with a final thought for the Talkaoke table? You might need to unmute yourself first. You look like you're in a giant Petri dish.
It's soup.
Oh, it's soup. Okay, right.
It's soup. Yeah, that's my final thought. Thank you, guys. Lovely. Enjoy the rest of the evening.
Fantastic, thank you, Steve. So Steve has left us with a final thought of soup. I know Victoria got a point. I don't know whether we're due a host change. Maybe we'll go to Victoria and then we'll think about doing a host change. So Victoria, please, let's go to you.
Point. I just don't know if it was, I don't know, hold on a second.
Oh, can we hear you?
Yes.
Victoria, come in.
Well, yeah, I mean, I agree with what Richard was describing. I feel like I wonder if it's to do with like Mikey was saying, emotional intelligence, because women, like a lot of times women like are taught to like adapt to other people a little bit more. So you kind of like learn skills of understanding other people's emotions and generally like observing emotions a little bit better almost. But also there was another point Ian was saying. Oh, sorry.
So Ian was before the Amish joke. Ian was talking about, and now I'm blanking in. You're gonna have to give us a little recap.
Oh,
so about confident.
Oh no, it was at confident.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Very small point I want to make is that when he was saying about confidence and like how it comes from like, you know, I don't know if that's what you were saying. You're saying that it's like if you come from like a more wealthier background. Is that what you were saying? That you have more confidence?
Basically.
Kind of.
Yeah.
Well, so, but in my, like, the way I also see it is that if you have a background with a bit, maybe you had to go maybe with more struggle, a lot of times it can also push you because it gives you this like energy that, you know, if of course, if person has growing up traumatic experience, and it can, you know, sometimes it can really break someone, but if it doesn't break a person, then it can also give this kind of energy to bounce off and be actually more confident. And it's sometimes like, you know, it's nothing to do with actually the how much your parents own or anything like that. It's more about if you actually decide that you want to go against the traumatic experience, then it gives you confidence and in that.
Brilliant, fantastic, Victoria. All right, I think we might be queued up for a host change. Before we did, I think we've got the fantastic Dele on the chat, who potentially is going to be doing a poetry reading for us at some point.
Now's a good time, so we can do like we'll turn all the sound down here, and we'll hand over to Dele. If you're ready, Dele.
He's ready. Fantastic. We can give a round of applause.
Off, and then we can have a little. We are listening, though, Dele. We are listening.
Hi, guys. I will be reading from my collection titled The Senatorian Voices. And the poem I'm going to be reading is Dark Boxes of Charms. It's just there in the corner of my mind. It's a box full of wonders and gifts and love and charms and kindness and illusions and beautification and rage and forgiveness and truth and lies and dementia and psychosis and madness and insanity and thankfulness and denial and malfunction and dysfunction and beliefs and arrogance and femininity and death and the high heavens and the galaxies and masculinity and existence and purgatory and failure and achievements and white supremacy and the political wars and social dysfunctions and abuse and the voices of God Almighty and the voice of the devil and the crowd of beautiful angels and the representation of humanity and the media and the press and the misrepresented bunches of a demanding society and the critical world we live in and joblessness and recreation and procreation and the huge brown boxes and the lone boxes and the smaller boxes with dreams and hope and hope and hope and hope and resilience and medicines and doctors and the cures about business psychiatrists and the food sellers and the local news agents and the local off-license and the pubs and the television and the dark wars and death and resurrection and apologies and color and shape and dark voices and boxes and boxes and boxes and boxes and boxes and boxes. And this dark lone box full of charms. There we go, guys.
That was brilliant. Thank you so much, Dele.
It's a pleasure.
Can I say that was extremely well read as well? I got the emotion there as well, so it came across really well. Well done, mate. I enjoyed it.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you so much, sir.
All right. Well, hi, everyone. I'm Zoe. I'm your new host for now. Thank you one more time to Dele for that amazing rendition of his original poetry. Before that poem, before our break, we were kind of talking about a whole bunch of different things, but mostly about kind of emotional intelligence, different kinds of intelligence, whether generations or even biological genders have different intelligence, or Deli's poem was full of words and stuff that we could dig into. So does anyone want to come in on either kind of the intelligence stuff or in response to the poem? Everyone's just happy taking a break. We've got a lot of praise from Deli there, so well done in the chat. We were talking about change as well as intelligence, and whether change is good, bad, scary, whether it's easier to be involved in it if you're a part of it. Is change linked to intelligence? Can you have some sort of emotional intelligence that allows you to kind of weather change? Any thoughts on that, anyone? I think Margot has a thought. Yeah, let's go to Margot.
I think Ian, you wanted to say something as well.
No, you go ahead. You go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, about the emotional intelligence, I kind of wondered, like, on Monday, I better just double check that. I'm going to do my first ever poetry taster course. I'm quite excited, but I'm also a bit...
what does poetry taste like?
Hey, but
would that be food for thought?
Thank you everybody for hijacking my story there. But yeah, so I'm just going to be doing this poetry course, and I think, like, my understanding of poetry is all about emotion. It's all about this emotional intelligence, and I think Zoe's mic is a bit muffly. Is that true?
Hello.
Yeah. So there's just something on chat. But yeah, so I'm just a bit like worried because, I mean, can you write poetry just like with your head, or do you always have to like put emotions into it? Can you be a little bit more kind of not cynical, but is poetry always about just like pouring your heart out and your own experiences, or can it be just a bit more at the distance, is my question. Maybe to poets in the room, or for people who are writers, generally speaking. But yeah, no pressure. And Ian, you may want to say, because you write comedy, so.
I think, yeah, Ian wanted to come in and Victoria after.
No, go ahead.
All right, Victoria has a response to the question of poetry. Does it have to be emotional?
I think it can be whatever you want, like with any art, whatever you want. Do whatever you want, just do it. But I wanted to make a point on emotional intelligence, actually, because I have a friend that at the moment is working like on a project. He's basically studying psychology at the moment, and he's working with this like a more senior, so to speak, psychologist, and they're working on this like talk show where it's about sexual intelligence. And so a lot of times they have guests. It's a Latvian like talk shows. It's in Latvian. So I mean, unless someone talks here in Latvian, I would love you to, but I would send a link. But yeah, a lot of times they ask guests question, what do you think is sexual intelligence? And there was one guest that kind of linked it to emotional intelligence. And I started like thinking about more, actually, the more like watched episodes. Yeah, that actually it's quite broad. There's a lot to unpack in there. But yes, that is quite interesting. Actually, I've never heard about the term sexual intelligence anyway, even in English language. So yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. We're talking about many different kinds of intelligence, what intelligence can be. We have emotional, we have kind of knowledge-based enlightenment intelligence we've talked about, and now Victoria is introducing this sexual intelligence, which we don't really have a definition for yet. Does anyone feel like they have a sense of what that is, or a response to that? Katie wants to come in.
I want to come in, but I'm pretty sure Mikey should go first.
Okay, Mikey should go first. Let's hear it from Mikey then.
I mean, this is not actually about sexual intelligence, but it's about sexuality intelligence, which I think is different from sexual intelligence. And I learned a lot from an artist called David Madalla, who was a very out gay artist. And he always likes to collaborate with all of the guys coming out of art school. I think Rick did a collaboration with him as well. Fantastic artist, but he taught me a lot about sexuality, because as a straight man, your sexuality is almost like a default sexuality. It's not something that you question or think about. And he told me that it should be something that I that was proud of, that I thought about and celebrated, and worked out what it was. And I think that for me increased my sexuality intelligence somewhat. Some might say not enough, but I think that's an interesting thing, and it just goes to show how many different facets of, even what you might call sexual intelligence, as Victoria said, how many different facets there might be of this, because this wasn't really about, this was about sexuality and being comfortable with your own sexuality, not necessarily about doing sex or about interaction with other people as such.
So we have a sense of sexual intelligence and the intelligence of your sexuality, and
exactly.
and
I think
maybe
that's
different.
a bit different, but connected.
Katie, did you want to come back in on this?
Yes, please. I think intelligence in general is ability to consider and understand different perspectives. So the more different perspectives you can understand, the better, the more intelligence I would hold the person. Now, then the emotional intelligence would be ability to understand other people's emotions, a different variety of those. And then sexual intelligence, basically same thing applied to sex.
Okay, so we have just a sense of, all these different kinds of intelligence. I see Ian with a hand up, and then we'll go to Lewis.
Yeah, I used to think that I was pretty forward thinking, in that I never saw my own sexuality as black and white. I always thought there was a line, and that people put themselves between homosexual and heterosexual, and everybody is somewhere along that line. A lot of men are forced to the heterosexual thing just for that bravado. I know that my sexuality is not totally heterosexual in that sense. However, I've learned lots from so many other people that I realize it's not just a line, it's like a 3D kaleidoscope. And everything is relative to, especially with the LGBT on and on sort of thing, which I think is fine if people find their own sexuality. I know my sexuality now, and I'm very happy with it. And it enables me to be very loving with men, with other men that I love. And I'm not right to say that I love my male friends and I hug them. And I don't, it doesn't matter to me. That's who I am. And I'm not afraid of anything being said about that, because I'm totally at home with that. And I know that it's not totally heterosexual, so, and I rejoice in that.
Well, thank you, Ian. This idea of a kaleidoscope of sexuality is, I think, really, really great. And maybe John or George or Yaroslav or Larice or Paul, if that sparks something in you, come on in and let us know what you think. But let's go to Lewis to maybe talk about sexual and emotional intelligence.
Yeah, I was just going to say, with the emotional intelligence, I think often, and I think it's the same with sexual, it's about understanding your own, what's going on for you as well. And sometimes I think people in relationships sometimes they find themselves doing or saying things because they end up being not able to decipher what their own emotions are. So they end up perhaps sometimes putting themselves in positions or doing things for people that they, if they were able to reflect on it, perhaps wouldn't want to do, but you get suckered into doing things. And I think emotional intelligence is sometimes understanding that you're maybe understanding what you're feeling and what your actions should be as a result of that. And I think people get very confused with that.
So similar to Ian, kind of emotional intelligence making you more loving. I know Natalie wanted to come in, and then we'll go to Richard. Natalie.
Yeah. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. Just on intelligence, I was thinking about this the other day, the fact that they say that the more intelligent you are, the more you kind of downplay that. And the less intelligent you are, the more likely you are to sort of up yourself and like big yourself up and be like, yeah, I'm really, really smart. And And I consider myself quite an intelligent person. So does that mean I'm deluded? Am I not as intelligent as I think I am? And I've actually started to worry about that, because intelligence is something that I hold to quite high esteem, and I pride myself on. And I think that's sort of been spurred on by, like, just my experience at school, and sort of being put up on a pedestal in primary school. And now that I'm at uni, it's like, how do people do this? I'm not smart enough for this. So yeah, that's just my 2 cents.
Wow. So if you're smart, then you kind of are really modest, so you don't talk about it at all. But if you're maybe not so smart, you kind of big yourself up. Richard, what's your response to that, to intelligence?
Well, yeah, I'll respond to that, and then I'll say what I was going to say. But yeah, basically, I think when it comes to judging intelligence, again, it comes down to the perspective of what you're judging it against. By way of, for instance, a 6-year-old being able to do long division could be considered intelligent, but that wouldn't necessarily mean that 6-year-old put in a social situation would pick up on social cues and know how to ingratiate themselves into that social unit. But it was something that Lewis said, actually, that piqued my interest there. We're talking about emotional intelligence in being able to pick up and respond appropriately to the emotions of others. Isn't there something there also internal about being able to recognize when our own emotions are clouding our judgment or are making us act in ways that possibly aren't accurate? I will relate it back to the definition of autism, which is to be inside oneself. Now, I've done extensive work with people with autism, and I would refute that definition to the bitter end. But it again, it comes down to an ability to recognize our own feelings, our own perspectives, and recognize where they differ with others. So like emotional intelligence is twofold, but also they kind of overlap. Does that sort of make sense?
Yes, we have overlapping sense of intelligences. One informs the other. Maybe there's an internal emotional intelligence or an external one. David, I know you had your hand up in your crazy background. Do you still want to come in and add to the conversation? I think he's there.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, I'm cooking on the same time, so I got some chips going. But anyway, is intelligence an accumulation of knowledge? That's my question.
Is intelligence an accumulation of knowledge? Yeah, we have a lot of people who want to come in on this question. Okay, let's go to Larice, because we haven't heard from you at all. Come on in. Hello, welcome.
Hello everyone, nice to meet you all. I just want to say something very, very short. That I can't remember the philosopher, but he said that he who knows he knows nothing. So just to kind of speak on the modesty of people who are intelligent and modest.
So the kind of two kinds of intelligence. Either it's an accumulation of knowledge, or maybe it's knowing nothing at all and knowing that you know nothing. I mean, what do we think? Victoria, you want to come in?
Yeah, it's the same. Like Larry said, there's the less I know, the more I know, the less I know. Kind of like, because like the more you know, the more you're aware of how much there is out there. Sort of.
Right.
But I wanted to make, just come back to Richard, because yes, of course, I think it's impossible to recognize emotions of other people if you don't recognize them in themselves. That begins with yourself. If you recognize emotions within yourself, then you are able to do recognize them in other people. Otherwise, I don't think it's impossible the other way around. But the main point I want to make is that I feel like a lot of times people confuse and put everything together in one pile. Things like, let's say, your self-esteem, or also, I don't know what would be the best word for it, like self-evaluation. When, for example, you did something, you do something at work, and then you kind of look back at it and evaluate what you did, and you think, okay, that did this job very well, or I mean, that was average, or that was really bad, I should improve next time. And because, you know, your self-esteem and your your emotional needs are very different things. And like, yeah, so I feel like sometimes people put all these things in one pile and think that it's all the same thing, but I feel like it's actually very different. You know, there's certain emotional needs that you have, and there are also your actions, like towards other people, that you need to be evaluated and you need to take responsibility for them separately. So it's a lot of different things going on in terms of emotional intelligence.
Yeah, this tension between knowing your emotions inside and knowing other people's emotions and how they work out in the world. Evie, you wanted to come in.
I was going to say, talking about you know, intelligence is the accumulation of knowledge. And I guess, like, if I was stranded on a desert island, then the amount of knowledge that I've accumulated about, you know, survival of the, you know, and survival techniques is going to matter to me. So I guess at some point, not like, you know, that kind of intelligence is quite useful as well. But maybe you're not more intelligent, you're just quite lucky in that situation because you know a lot about survival.
Paul, what do you think? If you're on a desert island and you've accumulated all of this intelligence, does that matter? Is that intelligence, or is it something else for you? I know you wanted to come in.
Yes, me. You said about being on an island?
Yeah.
Okay.
You've been to Greece.
I've been to Greece. I've been up the side of a mountain. Yeah.
You know, is the intelligence you accumulate from being on an island, is that enough, or do you need this kind of emotional intelligence or the sexual intelligence that we've been talking about?
All right. So I practice something called Wu Wei, which is it's part of Qigong and Tai Chi, and it's actually literally defined or translated as no mind. You actually turn off your processing. You don't process things. You actually just let things be as they are. So, accumulating information is all well and good. It's what you do with it is what counts. Also, you got to define, not define, but sort of understand where wisdom sits with all this. And it's also interesting things about, I've mentioned this before, about the Hawaiian model of psychology. You have three minds, and there's one in your belly, one in your head, and then one above your head. And as it is, we do find that we do a lot of thinking with our stomach. We do a fair bit of thinking in our heads, but the bit above our head I wouldn't know about. But I think there's this approach that you have multi-format approach to how you have intelligence, or I much prefer wisdom. I've met really intelligent people who are really bad with people, and also you can have really amazing people who don't have the greatest education but they have great wisdom and understanding of people. Richard's point about autism is fantastic because I relate to that completely. I work with people from all sorts of kinds of abilities, and I see that especially at the moment, I'm working with a lot of learning disabilities, and they see through everyone. You see through everyone. You can all these layers we build, constructs. Ooh, a wonderful word, but they're just layers that we build up, and they just see through it. So intelligence, it can be manufactured and can be like a shadow puppet play, or it could be really just about how you present yourself. Yes, Mikey, like one of that. Yeah, look, it's sooty in the nude.
Well, this is really interesting, Paul. Wisdom versus intelligence. What is the difference between those two things? Ian, you've been very patient.
Thank you. Yeah, wisdom and intelligence is not the accumulation of facts and figures. I mean, I know that because I know people that know everything about one subject and nothing about life. I could sit here and tell you about the Bad-Godesberg Agreement in 1957, but it seldom comes up at parties. You know what I mean? And also, I think it's the way that we like to present ourselves. If you want to present yourself as intelligent, you reel out a lot of bits like I just did, but but none of it makes any sense if you don't use it, like our friend just said, in an open way,
Yeah, let's go to Mikey and then Victoria.
I would say it's about 42% knowing about facts and figures.
Interesting. So, yeah, is it this accumulation of knowledge of facts and figures or something else, Victoria?
Yeah, I mean, they say in Hollywood ideas are worthless. It's more about what do you do with those ideas. It's like also about how do you make them happen. A lot of people have ideas, but doesn't mean all of them do them.
Right. So is intelligence just actions? Are actions more important than intelligence? Or, yeah, Mikey?
I just want to bring in the word creativity here because I think it hasn't been mentioned yet. It's one of our favorite words that people speak. So, what about creativity? I think coming up with ideas is a creative act. In itself, it doesn't really, as you say, doesn't really mean anything, but it's got to be the starting point to do anything fun. And the more ideas, the better. So I don't know what we're talking about, wisdom and intelligence. What about creativity? If you're on the desert island, surely it's the creativity that's going to get you to build a boat to get off of the fucking island.
Yeah, Laura.
Yeah, I wanted to add compassion to the list. I think that's much more important than intelligence because, well, is it maybe, I'm not entirely sure if I'm correct, but is it not, there is a lot of like psychopaths that are very intelligent people and they are the worst. So shall we just go a little bit into the direction of the compassion then rather than intelligence?
Compassion rather than intelligence. Richard?
Sorry, yeah. Just because it was a term that was brought in there, I'd just like to say psychopathy, as it's described in psychiatry, is the ability to understand other people's emotions, but having no value for them, which is why you see a lot of successful psychopaths in like business and banking and things like that, which feeds very nicely into what the young lady just said about empathy. It's they recognize emotion, but they don't value it, and therefore they will use it to their advantage.
Right. So you understand what people are feeling, but you just don't care that they're feeling it. Is that right?
Yeah, that's the psychiatric definition of psychopathy. Yes.
Okay, that's interesting. Thanks for that definition. That's helpful. Yeah, Evie.
Oh no, I wonder whether it's I guess don't value it is a good way of thinking about it, because is it that you don't care or you just can't empathize with it? Because I think I've heard like urban myths or a friend who's known a friend who said, oh well, this person was married to a psychopath and he functioned really normally. He just and he just couldn't see the world in the same way, but he still had a family, he still had a job, he still had kids, and it was just he just knew that they work differently. So if they're upset, he had to be like, okay, they're upset, why are they upset? And and understood that's why, but just had to have like a rational motivation for things rather than maybe an emotional one.
So kind of going back to what Laura said, maybe it's compassion, empathy that makes you intelligent.
But I guess he managed to have a family and he didn't have any compassion. I mean, this could also just be some chat that I heard at work, but it was like an interesting concept. Like, so his thing was, I'm a rational person. I want to have a community around me. I just don't relate to it in the same way that other people do.
Victoria, what's your response to that?
It's actually, I just wanted to make a couple of points. Just get back to Mikey about creativity, because, I feel like, of course, creativity is valuable because it's just one of the main things that we humans have. We are able to solve problems through creativity. But again, like if creativity is just in your head and you're just like laying down flat on the floor and you're just unable to use it, I mean, that's what's the value in that, I guess. But coming back to the point about psychopaths and being psychopaths and banking and stuff like that, it kind of almost comes back to the idea of enlightenment, because a lot of people that invented, let's say, and what is enlightenment? Because a lot of people that invented weapons were really intelligent people, are really clever, a lot of scientists and stuff like that. I think there is always this, I feel like today really obviously like society talks a lot about this component of empathy and really just really sort of recognizing other human emotions.
Thank you for that.
Lewis is going.
Yeah, we want to go to Ian, but Lewis is heading off. If you're still here, Lewis, can you give us a final thought to the group to leave us with?
I just want to say thank you to everybody. My internet decided to play up, so I'm going to cut my losses now. It's been great. I've done a few of these, and I really enjoyed this evening. So just thanks to everybody, really. That's all I'd like to say. Some very intelligent comments made, and a lot of stuff to go away and think about. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Lewis. Let's get a round of applause for Lewis. All right, Ian. Well, we're intelligently talking about intelligence. What have you got? What have you got?
Then I had to spoil it. Lack of compassion and lack of empathy seems to be deceiving for a politician. Somebody that has to make hard decisions on behalf of other people that they're not really affected by it. That's just what occurs to me. It's a stereotypical politician.
So does being a psychopath make you a better politician? Does someone who can't actually feel the emotions of other people make better decisions? Is that kind of what you're saying?
No, not better decisions. They're liable to make decisions for other people. Things like, cutting nursery spaces, underfunding the NHS, that kind of thing. These things cost lives, but they're done for financial stability. So there's all kinds of questions that come from that. I wouldn't be able to live with myself if I felt a decision that I made endangered the life of somebody else.
So do your emotions kind of get in the way of your decisions?
I just think it's interesting, though, because if you think of the current Prime Minister, I think that's someone who makes a decision probably a lot more based on what people think he should be doing than he ought to be. So, maybe it is. Maybe you do want to be slightly psychopathic to be a politician, because, like you say, you're always going to have to make those hard decisions.
Mikey, let's.
I mean, I think, psychopaths are giving it a bad name because of Boris Johnson. But, there is a place that I think the fact that we've got so many psychopaths in our society must mean there is a place for psychopaths. Like, take someone like Winston Churchill, that, when he was the Prime Minister, he made decisions that did end people's lives. It caused famines, bombing civilians. He did that without much kind of remorse. But in the sense, he became Britain's most, best respected Briton, or whatever the award was. And it's like he's a psychopath, but he's our psychopath. So he's on our side. He's helping us. So in a way, I do think there's something in our society where we actually want the psychopaths to be the decision makers.
Yeah, Victoria really wants to come in, and then we'll go down to Jawei. Am I saying it right?
Yeah,
that's my name. All right, we'll come back to you. Victoria first.
Yeah, I mean, Mikey, it sounds like really kind of slippery slope what you're saying, because I don't think people really want psychopaths to be in charge. If you meet them face to face, you'll probably hate that person, because they'll just be maybe rude or ignore your feelings. If I'm understanding psychopaths correctly, but I feel like there is a difference between ignoring your emotions and being in charge of them and controlling them. I think there's a big difference, like understanding your emotion and being in charge of them, or just like completely ignoring your own emotions and emotions of other people. I feel like society is more ideally, society would be great if society moved more towards this idea of like being aware of emotions, what's going on in your head, being able to direct it. If you're getting angry, just being able to express it in a non-violent way. I mean, that would be ideal for me.
Yeah, so do we need these psychopaths to have no emotion and control the government, or is it just about knowing the emotions well enough so that you can make good decisions? Jawei, did you want to come in?
Yeah, for sure. That's super interesting, because I was thinking the society that we're living in kind of have this algorithm pool that is reinforcing the character that is pro the power, the people who are, you know, charismatic, very full of charisma, you know, good at public speaking and full of just like very charming. And if this system is reinforcing those characters, then we will see more and more people with sort of like a narcissistic personality that's quite charming at the same time to get into a higher position of the hierarchy in terms of power and you know, organizational structures and such. So I think it's quite important to notice that it's quite important and meaningful to integrate both the feminine and masculine power together, to integrate that so that we can bring about more healthier leadership rather than a bunch of narcissists.
What do you mean by feminine masculine power?
I guess in an organizational, I think I was reading a piece on organizational psychology. It says something about in an organization, if we have too much of a feminine energy, then, you know, then we will go through a lot of a mundane discussion around things, making sure everyone is making their needs met. But more of a masculine organizational leadership might feels like quite dominant, very, you know, go-getter and very goal-oriented. If we can integrate that, or have different people in the organization playing different parts, then we will have, you know, kind of different feeling and vibes in the society. I mean, in the office even. So. Yeah.
So what do people think? Do people think there is this feminine, masculine energy? Do we need to be embracing these narcissists who are kind of, you know, coming out of the woodwork to lead our country? Katie, you want to come in, then we'll go to Victoria.
Just wanted to answer Javi's point about different energies in the companies. I once worked in a company where from 230 employees, there were about 10 or 12 male. And it wasn't the issue of people caring about each other's emotions too much. It were issues about way too much drama going on. The company was through 3 floors and it was insane. I lasted there a bit over a year, but it was crazy, like honestly crazy. Even going to ask for a day off was a huge challenge because it impacts a bunch of people in different ways, and you need to know how they'll react the next work day. It was crazy. But on the other hand, the opposite, where I worked in IT, and it was totally opposite flip, it was equally bad. So I think, and like, it doesn't mean that only females do the parts. Like, it can be flipped between the genders anyway, how people play. But both of those trends, when it's in balance, it's either too much drama or too much competition. Pretty much.
Victoria.
I mean, I just generally don't really, well, not just me, but generally don't think emotions are gender-based, in my opinion. I mean, I worked in plenty of male environments where, like, you know, there's just as much gossiping going on, and it's even more gossiping to my taste. I mean, maybe because I don't have such a, I would say, yes, I worked in both female, like more like environments where there are more women, and there are also environments where just like, oh, I'll be like the only woman or something. And yeah, just as much gossiping, honestly. I don't really believe that emotions, I guess, are gender-based. And I think it's the difference comes when in the upbringing and, you know, yeah, it's just more about the upbringing. But I believe that, you know, men or other people, just generally everyone is capable of feeling emotions, even animals. So animals have also, you know, I guess living with my cat for the past year, talking a lot about animals too, because I really do see that animals too have basic emotions like fear, interest, whatever, like other emotions.
Compassion as well, I think.
You know, I can see when my cat is scared, like, you know, I can see it in front of me. He's not aware of it. So, yeah.
Yeah, so this question of, do the genders have different energies, different emotions?
Yeah, my thesis is that emotions are not gender-based.
Right, so that actually emotions are shared between everyone. Yeah, Richard, what do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I'd completely agree that emotions are to a certain extent universal. What I think we're kind of omitting and focusing a little bit too much on gender per se is the whole idea of the biopsychosocial model.
Can you explain that to us? What is that?
Yeah, it's essentially that no behavior is inherently linked to one thing. Okay, so there will always be social stressors that push people to act in certain ways. There will always be psychological stressors based on your background and your experience. By way of, for instance, arachnophobia is well accepted as a fear. If someone had a fear of dogs, if they were bitten by a dog as a child, you would say, "Oh, that's rational." But if they hadn't received that bite, you would then say, "Oh, well, that's irrational." And the biological side of it comes from the hardwired nature of our bodies. So by way of, for instance, we see everything in 3D, but that 3D image is taken from a 2D image on our retina, right? So basically, it's a dot matrix of your cones and rods go, this is color, this is white, this is black, boom, boom, and your brain uses some process to go, right, this is now 3D. We do that automatically, and we have no control over it. Hence why you can draw lines on a piece of paper and our brain will read it as a 3D box, even though we know it's not 3D. So there's an interplay from all three aspects in practically everything. The problem is deciding exactly which bit is doing what and to what extent.
So is the idea that your emotions can't be really untangled from who you are? Is that kind of what you're saying, that the actions and your outside environment and what you see and what you feel, all of that kind of determines what your emotions are, not, some sort of born characteristic? Is that the idea?
No, the idea is that you may be biologically more likely to experience certain emotions by the way that we see that certain hormones or certain things create emotions. But then there's the social factor of how you're supported around that will then impact on that.
Right. So maybe your body means that you're not in control of what you feel, but the people around you also help you navigate that.
And then there's a social element that comes in on it as well, in terms of, by way of, for instance, if we were in a society that said anxiety is weakness, you would then be predisposed not to display anxiety, even if you were biologically more likely to be anxious and you had an experience that had generated anxiety in your past. What I'm saying is there's sort of three different things at play, each of them having a different effect and each of them having a different strength.
Yeah, I think Natalie wants to maybe come in. What's in play with your emotions, or do you think that emotion is kind of embodied?
Yeah, I was gonna. I think I've kind of changed my mind since you started speaking, Richard. I was gonna say that, so Victoria said that we all have the same capabilities of emotion, of feeling the same things, and of sort of behaving the same way emotionally. And I was going to say that I agree, but I think if you were brought up socially, assumed to be a boy when you were born, and brought up that way and assumed to be a girl, then that changes how you express your emotion. And so while it's not necessarily innate, there is a sort of difference between gender generally, which is to do with the social. And I think that's basically what you said, Richard.
I know Victoria's desperate to come in and clarify something, I think.
Yeah, I didn't mean that. I meant that, when we're born, both men and women can have emotions, is my point.
Yeah.
But Richard really pointed out something that I also agree with, that, for example, I've heard from many different sources that, there are some people that are more leaned, that are more sort of I don't know if able to is really the best way to describe it, but they're more likely to get depression, for example, because, you know, their, let's say, their ancestor, let's say, lived in the countryside, they had very slow lifestyle, lived in the sun, and when, you know, maybe like you're current yourself, your surroundings maybe don't really live up to that expectations, so you're more likely, let's say, to get depressed. So I've heard about from many sources, so I agree with that. So, but I guess what I'm saying is that I just don't, what I said before is that I don't like this idea of like, oh, women are more emotional or men, because like men just as much can experience emotions the same, and it's just, okay, there are obviously social factors like how you were brought up, and it shapes you in many ways.
Yeah, what do some people we haven't heard from think yet about this kind of gendered emotion or gendered sense of how we feel things? John, do you have any opinion on whether emotion is created through your body, through your society? Maybe it's some combination of the two or the three. Anything you want to add in here?
Is that me?
Yeah, that's you.
That's me. Oh, right. Sorry, I've been very dedicatedly quiet listening to all the wisdom that's been going on. Can I, before I answer your question, can I just go back to this discussion about intelligence?
Of course.
I always find it very, very worrying when there is too strong, in my view, too strong a link between intelligence and knowledge. Because it seems to me that we've got three things here: Mikey's creativity, intelligence, which was raised in general, and knowledge, which came along with it. Well, it seems to me that the creative person is likely to have an idea which is not restrained by knowledge available or at the time. That is thinking beyond knowledge, because knowledge is a huge deterrent from thinking up great ideas. So the person with the great creativity is ignoring the knowledge for the time being. The intelligent person comes in and assembles the best knowledge to make the idea work. So the reason I'm saying this is because a lot of thought going on for me at this time is the urgency that our leaders show at stuffing all our children and young people back into institutions for education. Because I honestly am worried about, and this is going back to the bit of the discussion when I first came in. Yes, it is actually true that human life is getting longer, but the proportion of it that is spent in preparation rather than in application is actually getting shorter. And I can't see how anybody with either intelligence or, come to think of it, knowledge could call that progress, because it means we need more and more people to waste more and more time learning things that they will never use and will always be squashed by other people's superior or more extensive knowledge, and actually spend only a smaller proportion of their entire lives living life. And that's quite worrying. Now, I'm the oldest of all of you by a long way. So I'm thinking backwards and saying, what does it all amount to? And you know, the most valuable things I've got, and I do not know how I can possibly share them, are memories. And there's a little bit of, there is a little bit of thought going on about how we manage memory. But on the question of gender and gender bias and how this influences the ways that we feel, I think that there is a kind of underpinning, and I'm going to turn to Richard to see if he can agree with this. There is a kind of underpinning of how capable we are and across what spectrum at feeling powerfully that relates to the male or the female, because that would be biologically highly advantageous. But after that, what we demonstrate is that males rush off with a profound indifference to what females may feel. And that's shown up by another thing that interests me at the moment. There is a desperately unpleasant condition of the female that apparently affects 1 in 10 worldwide. but I bet you a pound to a bent brass farthing that there aren't one out of every 10 males who has the slightest idea what it's about.
Richard, did you want to kind of give your opinion on whether John's right there?
I'm going to be quite careful with what I say here because I realise this is a very diverse group and I don't want to give an opinion based on my knowledge that is misinterpreted. One thing I will raise before I go into it is I'm not quite sure what the condition John was referring to is.
That's a good question. Is anyone sure what this condition is about?
I was going to say, is it endometriosis? Is it something to do with your ovaries?
It is actually endometriosis, yes, but it isn't.
Can you explain a little bit about what that is for the rest of us?
It's not necessarily to do with the ovaries, but I don't want to distract us to be talking about endometriosis.
No, I just wanted to know what the condition was. Just in case I was missing something, but having heard that, no, I can understand. And what I will say is, yes, there is a biological aspect to emotion, and what we can see from looking at hormones and things like that is that there is a great interplay between our biological chemistry and our emotional responses to things. However, what I will also say is, going back to the biopsychosocial model, is that looking at gender in terms of, there's no easy way to say this, in terms of your genitals, is not that's a very binary thing. All the wiring underneath is not necessarily as binary. Yes, it may be more likely if you end up presenting physically in a way that you have female genitals, that you are more emotional. Yes, but that's a kind of wonky statistic in terms of it's to do with prenatal hormone exposure. It's to do with all sorts of other aspects of development. We've seen it with things like eunuchs, when people were castrated for singing voices and things like that, that influences development. It's not always entirely accurate to just go, all right, because someone has this genitals, this is going to happen. That's an odd way of looking at things. They might make things statistically more likely, but that doesn't make it factual. So
yeah, I think in general, I completely agree with what Richard has just said.
Right. So can you explain a little bit more which part of that do you agree with, John?
Which part?
Yeah.
well, that genitals are binary, as Richard says, but how we feel, both about sexuality, sexual behavior, emotional experiences, emotional understanding and sharing is not binary.
It's interesting. I think Natalie and Katie in the chat maybe disagree with you about genitals being binary. Natalie, do you want to maybe come in and tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I was of the idea that genitals are binary, and chromosomes and things like that. But actually, there's, and I don't know that much about this, so I don't want to get it wrong, but there are a group of people who are known as intersex, where they may not fit into that binary. They may have an extra chromosome, like XXY. They may have genitals which don't physically fit the appearance of what you'd expect for male or female. And while some people would argue that, well, those are conditions, those are anomalies, those maybe cause health problems and aren't the norm, they're actually more common than we'd expect. And they don't always cause any kind of health problem or anything that sort of says that this is abnormal, this is wrong. It can be perfectly normal if the person's healthy and happy. And I think, I can't remember exactly what the percentage is, but intersex people are about as common as people who have natural red hair. So that's not that rare.
Katie, did you? I didn't know that. Katie, did you want to add some information here?
Yes. I mean, first point was definitely about the intersex, but coming back to the emotions, my experience on the subject might be quite subjective, but before the hormone therapy, I felt like there was kind of an emotional switch in my head, not about which emotions I feel in different situations, but what triggers those emotions. And I found that depending on the circumstances, let's say if I'm among a group of guys, I could easily switch it to one end, and I would find very easy to find a common ground with them. And let's say I'm in a room with women, then I would just switch it to the other end, and I would get different triggers, and I would find it very easy to find common ground with them at that point. I'm pretty sure hormones do quite a big deal about this, because after hormone therapy, it's much more stuck on one end.
That's really interesting. So you felt like before hormones, you were able to just kind of like switch on and off these emotions, and
it was literally like a light switch. I could go into a room and just switch it at will.
Wow, that's really interesting. Victoria, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to point out that at the end, like actually Casey makes a great point about hormones, and yes, I'm sure, I'm not a doctor, don't understand much about hormones, but I have an impression that they do have a big impact on how you look, how you feel, how your body works, your voice, certainly how your brain reacts to certain emotions. But again, emotions at the end of the day are only your reaction to what's happening around you. Like it's just your a way to adapt to your physical environment. It's just your reaction to something negative is happening. You feel negative emotion because you don't like it, and it's just reaction. So in terms of I guess coming back to that point of are women more emotional or men are more emotional, or whatever, or intersex people more emotional? I mean, I can't imagine a single person who would not react to whatever is happening around to the life is happening to you. So you get to react in some kind of way, and emotions I don't know if it's a coping. It's like almost like a coping mechanism. I mean, if it's a positive, I don't think coping mechanism is the best way to describe it, but it's just a mechanism to react to the outside world. So I can't imagine a single person or a creature that wouldn't have some kind of emotions to respond to the outside world.
Yeah, so emotions just as this reaction instead of maybe something biological, something that's going on inside.
Well, not instead of something biological.
As well as.
The best way to say. I'm not saying it's instead of biological. I'm saying it's just. That's just what I can't imagine a creature which wouldn't have some kind of emotional response to something happening.
Mm-hmm. I was just going to say, it makes me think of Victoria, your point earlier. It's almost like it's not just your reaction to a particular thing that's happening, but also other people's reactions to your reaction to how that's interpreted. So I think your point earlier about I've been into in an office with loads of I don't know, cis guys, and they're very gossipy or very bitchy, and I was like, yes, I've seen that behavior a lot, where you see one group of people and they behave in one way and it's interpreted that's just them chatting shop or catching up. And then, if it was a group of women, I was like, oh, they're being bitchy or they're gossiping, when actually it's the same behavior or it's the same reaction. I think being emotional as well, so being angry is accepted as a better emotion to be than maybe sad if you're getting a piece of news at work, for example. So yeah, it's also how people react to those reactions.
Well, there's a whole other aspect to how society or people around you interpret or react to you being you.
Yeah.
Some people try to, if there's a person that didn't sort out how they feel themselves, or they're psychologically not healthy or something, or just whatever is in their head, they might influence, and they try to, might influence you. But my point is, we feel it's just the feeling itself is kind of a universal thing, in my opinion. And of course, but yeah, anything that happens around you, when I said what's happening around you, it's literally can be anything. Somebody looked at you in a certain way, somebody said, the sunshine, I don't know. You wake up and there's a smell of cookies, or.
Yeah, Richard, I think you were really interested in coming in on this idea.
Yeah, I would agree, and again, I'd bring it back to the idea that things are interpreted in different ways. From my perspective as a psychiatric nurse, I can certainly see, and one of the things I rallied against in a lot of the jobs that I had, there's certain ways certain behaviours are interpreted. So, by way of, for instance, if someone with a diagnosed personality disorder approached a certain member of staff to ask them for something, they would be described as splitting the team because they were playing favourites. And my immediate response to people saying that would be like, if you're at work and you're going to a manager to ask for a day off, do you go to the one you know will say yes? Or do you go to the one who's probably going to question you? It's exactly the same response, but it's interpreted in completely different ways. In one sense, it's just, oh, I'm looking after my interests and trying to get my day off. And in the other sense, it's, oh, that's a manipulative and quite deceitful behavior.
Paul or Larice or Geraldine or someone we haven't heard from in a while, does this kind of conversation of, emotions and gendered emotions, or maybe emotions being determined by the society and by people's interpretations of how you react, does that spark anything in you? Do you guys want to come in?
I'm going to say something to what Richard said, which was quite interesting, because I wanted time off from work. I wanted 6 weeks off for study leave because I'm in my final year of university. And I personally, the manager that I'm having, he's not my favourite. So I went to a different manager and he okayed it. So I don't know. So I think there's a kind of interesting point. But yeah, I think, why would I go to a manager that is probably going to say no, especially when I feel like the environment I'm in, it kind of is a bit, they have a bit of favoritism and stuff like that. So I feel like if everyone else is playing that game, I would be disadvantaged to not, well, I'm not playing favorites, but I'm going to a manager that I know is going to be more understanding, because I should get time off for uni, But I thought that was very interesting.
So we're all kind of like playing this game of who we can get to do what we want, who will actually help us get what we need. Yeah, Mikey.
Well, I mean, I think it's good to have this discussion about emotions and understand, the different places where people are coming from. But I think there's no point having the discussion, he said in a very male way, unless you can advance things or get something from it. Do you know what I mean? And we all at the beginning talked about this change that we want to see in the world. Is all of this discussion about emotions actually gonna move us anywhere? Is it gonna move us forward anywhere?
Yeah, Paul, come on in. What do you think?
Gandhi moment, isn't it?
We can't really hear you very well.
I'll repeat that.
Oh, there we go. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a bit like Gandhi. He said this, and I've not found it to be wrong in any instance. And it relates to all the other conversations about how we feel about things, because your environment is how you respond to it quite often. Sometimes we have no choice, and then we have to deal with it as we can. If you do have choices, you get away from it, or you manage it, or you optimize it, or you deal with it. And then what it is, it's your internal approaches that actually changes the world. Yeah, I mean, this is magical thinking too, but it's also very much about how we perceive things, and that spreads. It spreads ever so gently.
So if we think something or we feel something, that can kind of help change the world, help our actions change the world.
Pretty much. It sounds really, I don't know, mosaic. I think that's a good word, but it's the wrong one.
So can just feeling something, can that actually make something change, or do you have to go out and do it, or how are emotions?
Well, the Gandhi saying, it pretty much holds it all. It's be the change you want to see.
Be the change you want to see. If you internalize it will happen. Katie,
you can only if it's a bit like complaining about everyone leaving rubbish in the park. Just go around and pick up the rubbish in the park that's already there.
Right, actually do the action.
Yeah, and then you'll also understand that you'll not leave rubbish in the park yourself.
What do people think? Is it just about kind of believing that this change will happen? Is that enough? Is doing it yourself, that's what will motivate this kind of change that we want to see? Luis, you're nodding your head. What do you
yeah, I think you have to be the change. And I think you have to, yeah, I think if you constantly kind of judge and are very critical and you point the fingers, it's not always as effective as just being the change yourself. Because you never want to come across as hypocritical, you know. So I think being the change is very important. I also was thinking about, I was looking in the chat and a lot of the talk was about manipulation and stuff. But the question I have is, first of all, you know, what constitutes as manipulation? And also it depends on the environment you're in. So if a system isn't fair, you know, if a system was fair, then you wouldn't have to use certain things or wouldn't have to be a certain way. There shouldn't, you know, in an ideal world, there wouldn't be a need to, you wouldn't be allowed to move in certain ways, if that makes sense. I don't know if my thoughts.
Yeah, if the system was fair, you wouldn't need to manipulate your way or do kind of bad things to get your way. But maybe is it okay if the system is unfair for you to use these kind of tactics to get what you need, to get what you want?
Right. And is it bad? Because I don't know. I mean, me going to a different manager, is that bad? Because I would argue that there being, you know, managers giving study leave to other people and not to others, that's unfair. So again, it's perception, it's how you see it. It's not really manipulative. I don't know. Yeah, I think it's perception. I think
is it bad to blame the system when the system doesn't work? That's a really interesting question. Katie, what did you want to add?
Sorry, it takes a while to unmute. Not sure to which part to respond, because it's very beautiful how we circled back to talking about change like we did in the first half. And it always reminds me how if one to ask any person, would you like a better life? Most likely the answer would be yes. But when you ask the same person, would you like to change yourself? Most common answer is no. And it makes me kind of concerned. How can someone expect different results doing the same things? But I usually leave it at that. And as for manipulation, whether it's good or bad, I think the application is important. When I was in India, someone was raising a question: scalpel, is it a good or a bad thing? In a murderer's hands, it can take life away, and in a doctor's hands, it can save one. So it's not the thing which is good or bad, it's how we use it, what we do with it.
So much about how we see things is about how we interpret them, how other people are interpreting them.
And how we apply them, actually.
Right, and how we apply them. Yeah, Richard, you wanted to come in as well.
I did, but then Katie just rather wonderfully summed up my point. When I said manipulation, it automatically took on this negative connotation. And actually the point I'd been trying to make was we all do these sorts of behaviors. We all look to skew things slightly in our favor. That doesn't make us inherently wrong. That doesn't make us inherently bad.
Do we need to manipulate things in order to create change? You know, is that what change is? Just a manipulation of circumstances, or is there some other kind of emotion or something that we can bring into this? Yeah, Evie.
Well, I don't know whether Rich is saying like, are we just manipulating all the time? Which I guess maybe is definitely true. No, manipulating, negotiating, influencing, I guess are all the same words, aren't they?
Oh, Richard, you muted.
Yeah. Compromise could go in there as well, you know, giving something up to get something back. It's all about interplay. It's all about, you know, that sort of negotiating and maneuvering. Like, only when it becomes exploitative does it become negative.
Do you have to compromise to create change? Is that something that has to happen? Or can you kind of forge your own way through and do it all yourself? You know, yeah, Mikey.
what I'm worried about is this is all like a very personal change, and it's great if you're trying to climb up the career ladder or something like that. But remembering that, you know, as many people have said, we don't live in a fair society where the opportunities are not equally distributed. So some people are able to play the game a lot more effectively than others. So, you know, what about that bigger picture where, you know, we're trying to overcome, you know, these questions of privilege, of, you know, of structural biases? How is this all going to be lost in this kind of like individualistic power play where everyone's just doing the best they can to get what they want? Is that actually going to move the system on so that we don't have these kind of biases, so we don't live in a world, you know, where being somebody like me, you've got more access, but, you know, a middle-aged, middle-class white guy with white hair to boot. You know, it's so, you know, I think like somebody's got to actually do that bigger work, think about that wider picture as well, surely.
Yeah, how do we make change in the big kind of structural issues? Ian, you were shaking your head there a lot. What did you want to say?
And Paul is
no, I wasn't actually shaking my head. It reminds me of the thing about Stalin and the people that came after Stalin, and the people that came after Stalin had to live through the Stalin era to survive. So they became exactly like him, and that just prolonged the train of dictators, as it were. So to survive in that environment, you had to be like Stalin, and that obviously is going to mean that the creativity in there is non-existent, because the only way you can get through and get where you want to go is by being that person.
And Paul, if you're leaving us, can we have a final thought from you, please?
I've just written it, but I can see it.
Yeah, we like it when it's said to the table.
All right, to the table. All right, well, I think I've said something about being the change, but it's about being prepared to change, because we don't like change as humans. Generally, we don't really deal with it very well. So prepared to deal with change and build better habits. Habits are the most powerful, yet incremental things we can do.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a funny thing there. Well, it's not funny. Habituation's like an old word that the Victorians used to use for what we would call addicts nowadays.
Habituation.
Habituation.
Right, so the habit of doing something over and over again.
Well, no, it's like, yeah, it's sort of. It's a bit, yeah, it is. It's been taken to something a little bit too far and incorporating it into your general pattern of behavior.
Well, thank you. Round of applause for that final thought from Paul. Thank you very much for sharing.
Yeah.
I think you're leaving us on an
I am. Peace out.
Peace out, which is that, like, do we need to change our habits individually to create change, or is it more like what Mikey said, where we actually need to come together as a whole, as a collective, to kind of create this larger change? You know, which is it? A binary? Do we have to do individual work and then group work? Which is it? Or is there some way to do some sort of combination? No one has any thoughts on that.
My thought's not very profound, but I've always thought of someone, I really like change. Like, I like moving house, I like moving jobs, so that now this is making me doubt whether the change that I think I like is actually just a habit in itself. And so I'm having a bit of an existential crisis in that. So maybe that is not actually change. I've always prided myself on that.
So your change is actually just something you do again and again and again, and it's actually not change, it's just... Yeah.
So this has been a good chat, because now I can reassess my life patterns, I guess.
And your love of change. I mean, but I think, Katie, go ahead.
I would say, Evie, keep it, because you managed to habituate the only constant in the universe. I think that's pretty much good enough.
Oh, thank you. But isn't the universe going towards like an entropy of like no change whatsoever? Isn't the universe slowly slowing down and cooling down?
We're not sure yet. We're not sure yet. As much as I've dug into the subject, we're not sure yet.
Mikey says it's in 37 billion years, so I don't need to worry.
We're no longer sure. We're no longer sure. Just we're no longer sure about the dark matter and dark energy.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of interesting stuff happening in science.
It may well be that with a Big Bang that we might have a big crunch, but if we do have a big crunch, it's still going to be in some 5 to 10 billion years time. So it's not something we need to worry about urgently.
Yes. Yeah.
A big. What is a big?
It's like the
crunch?
opposite of a Big Bang, where the whole universe implodes into a tiny little dot.
Right, and everything stops. So all this talking about.
Or it just gives birth to another new universe.
Okay, so from nothing, maybe something comes out of it again, like the Big Bang. Richard, what did you want to add?
Well, just as we'd come back to this topic, I would just like to say, couldn't that be best summed up with the simple phrase, change is just a narrow view of continuation.
Oh, thank you, Richard, bringing us back.
Call back.
Come to our next comedy.
I was just about to say, you'd make a great stand-up. Change is just a small picture of continuation. I think you said it much nicer than that. Something like that. But if we think about the Big Bang and we think about this kind of big sense of, I don't know, things compressing and changing, I mean, does change even matter? Is that something we need to be trying for? Or if the world's going to just kind of stop in billions of years, like, I don't know, what are we working for? What are we working towards? Kate.
If you're talking about world, we don't have billion years. We have few million years before Earth is gone. So if you really want to find out what happens few billion years later, you need to find out how to leave this planet and actually solar system.
So actually what's happening is our world's changing too fast for us because
our sun eventually will burn out.
In a million years?
Some million years. I think it's like a few dozen, maybe million years or something like that. I mean, it's not that long a time scale.
So that's scary. What do we do about that?
I will check, not to be wrong, but it's way less than the universe it has left, according to any estimates. So continue the chat. I will just write in the chat the number.
So
there is the thing that we had a big meteorite sometime last week who passed like 200 million kilometers from Earth. But see, you could imagine that we could be blown up by a meteorite. So enjoy the life while it's there.
Right, live your life now because we could get hit by a giant meteor. Is that what you're saying, David?
Yes.
Yeah.
Or a truck.
Or a truck, yes. We've circled somehow back to the beginning. Or what are we afraid of? Are we afraid of these giant meteors and the sun exploding? I guess the interesting thing is, if you're afraid of something, does that stop you from kind of working towards something? Does that stop you from creating the sense of change? Does fear hold us back? Or can fear be a motivator to kind of spur on some of this change that we're talking about? Is fear a bad thing? To say that we're afraid of all this stuff? Is it a good thing? Is there any way that it's, helpful?
I think it is a helpful thing because I have 2 pet fish at the moment I've been given, and I don't know how to look after fish, so I've had to learn how to look after them. And every day I'm afraid that they're going to die, but because of that, it means that I research a lot about how to try and make them live for as long as possible. And I think a lot of fear of humans is that around that idea of we don't want these things to happen, so we're going to put a lot of time and energy into trying to learn how to not do it, and therefore that's why we've got things like vaccines, and that's why we've got things like modern medicine, or good central heating. So I think fear can be good.
So fear spurs us towards knowledge and intelligence. Maybe that's interesting. Katie.
Sorry, the hand is up from before.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine.
Did GA have her hand up down there? Joey have a hand up, or was that just a stretch?
Oh, I don't know.
No.
Was it a wait?
Somebody want to make a final thought?
Yes, go ahead, David. Please bring us a final thought.
It's not my final thought. Somebody on the chat, somebody like Sonny said, saying that they had to go and they wanted to make a final thought.
Whoever has to go, please jump in and let us know.
Oh yeah, that was me. I didn't want to interrupt.
Thank you, Laura.
Yeah, I love my final thought, but now I thought how we were talking about history repeating itself, is it true or not? And then our conversation kind of went in the circle and went back to the beginning thoughts. So I guess it's a very nice metaphor of life in a sense as well. It's not the same because we learned so much through the last 2 hours, but we made a circle, and now we can talk about it again, wiser, and yeah, I love it. So thank you so much, guys, for tonight. It was amazing to listen.
Thank you, Laura, for tying all that up so nicely for us and for that nice circle. We'll give you a round of applause. No? Round of applause?
Yes. Well, I'm not on the sound effect.
Ian, yes, you want to come in and...
Yeah, I'm going to say good night now, and just to thank you all. I've been trying to say this. It's got nothing to do with anything that's been said already, but I've just got it on my mind and I need to tell people. And that is, it's totally irrelevant, but when I don't know if you're aware of the actor Bela Lugosi, who played Dracula. No?
I don't know.
It was on the reference to garlic earlier. But when he died, his family had him buried in his full Dracula costume and everything, like, you know. So sooner or later he's going to be dug up and it will re-emerge that there were vampires. And on that note, I'll say good night. And I have to say I've enjoyed every moment, and there's some really intelligent people out there. And God bless you all.
Thank you, Ian. Round of applause for Ian. You know, I think it might be a good time to get final thoughts from everyone.
Yes.
And it'd be great to hear from everyone before we all head out to kind of wrap up this conversation in a nice history repeating itself cyclical way. Does anyone have a burning final thought they want to share? Yes, Victoria.
So when I came back, Margaret was talking about fishes.
Fishes?
No,
talking about fish. Evie was talking about fish.
You're talking about some animal or pet, right?
Yes, yeah.
And about some kind of almost like an anxiety that you're feeling about it dying, like you don't want it to die. And you know, at the end of the day, even negative emotions, I guess, can be positive, because even anxiety is very much a driving force for humans to survive. So it also can be a good thing. So just wanted to make that point about.
I'm glad to hear that.
All emotions are valuable. I guess I'm just always talking about emotions, but yeah.
Thank you. Round of applause for that final thought as well. You know, we've talked about a lot. We've talked about change. We've talked about intelligence. We've talked about emotion being either a hindrance or some sort of driving force. We've talked about it being internal and external. Does anyone have any final thoughts they want to share about any of that? Or, you know, what you're afraid of, or an asteroid hitting Earth? Yes, David.
Talking about the fish again, I would advise not to overfeed them, because you might kill them by overfeeding them. So basically, if you're kind of like stressed or anxious with your fish, don't reach for the food, because that would be their poison.
Thank you.
Anyway, this was my final thought.
That's a really helpful final thought, I would think. Thank you for that. Larissa, you going to come in about fish or something completely different?
Something completely different. I was thinking back to what John said about the difference between wisdom and intelligence and imagination and, say, creativity. And then thinking about what you said about fear and application. And I often think the reason why a lot of people aren't applicating their knowledge or aren't as out of the box because they're fearful. And I think a lot of the times being afraid or not being as confident or not being as self-assured can lead to people not thinking out of the box. I think everyone's intelligent. I think a lot of the times it's, you know, fear of kind of being, I don't know, ostracized or being kind of laughed at or whatever it is. And that's why we don't get a lot more kind of eureka moments, you know, Albert Einstein moments or other, you know, other. So I think, yeah, fear and yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, fear holding us back, you know, that everyone has this intelligence, but fear maybe stops some of us from sharing it in a bigger way. Or Yeah. I mean, can we hear from someone who maybe hasn't spoken in a while about their final thoughts? Maybe someone who's been listening the whole time. Yes, Geraldine.
Yeah, that would be me. Hello, good morning. Hi. My final thought is the great words of Wiley: evolve or be extinct.
Say that again. I think we missed it.
My final thoughts. Can you hear me? Because my sound's often bad. You can hear. My final thoughts are taken from the great Wiley, and they are evolve or be extinct.
Evolve or be extinct. Right. Okay. I like that. That's, change in the extreme sense. We really need to make something happen, or else we're kind of screwed.
Sorry, I just plunged that in there, but that would be.
No, that's great. I mean, I think, you're really hitting on some of the things we've talked about for all of today. So that's great. Thank you so much. We've had our round of applause. Thank you. Thank you. Any other final thoughts? Deli, is that a hand?
Just a hand, yeah.
All right,
What I'm gonna say is to do with death, and I find myself every day thinking about death a lot, and I know death is inevitable. And also, what I wanted to say is change. We need to prepare for change because the world will always keep evolving, no matter what we do.
We won't always keep evolving.
We will always keep evolving.
Yeah, we will. Okay, yeah. So change is kind of this inevitable thing that we have to embrace. Anyone else for their final thoughts before a few more minutes? Anyone want to share maybe what they've been afraid of has changed? Yeah, Abby.
I guess I maybe want to move away from change for a moment, but I do like change. I've enjoyed the change of the new Talkaoke host in the middle. So I've enjoyed that. I think that's more what I wanted to say. And thank you to everyone who's given me some fish tips. That's very good to know as well. I think those are my final thoughts.
That's great. Thank you. I mean, fish tips galore. We'd love more fish tips and final thoughts. Anyone else want to share a few things before we head out? Who haven't we heard from? John, we haven't heard from you. Where you're leaving with us
Final thought.
Yeah.
Final thought. Well, just something to contemplate. A lot of attention paid to emotions, to feelings. And I kind of anchored on the usefulness, the utility of feelings for the human individual. But in fact, in general, feelings are precursors to action, even if that action is purely neurological or psychological. So that if I am afraid of Mikey, because I think next time I see him, he's going to punch me on the nose, then I can take that fear, come forward and be sure that he doesn't do that. I will then have become a better and more balanced person. But what then becomes a little bit worrying is, how do we actually think that we are responding emotionally to prospects of what may happen in 1 or 5 or 10 billion years? I am a little bit bothered about what will happen in 1, 5 or 10 days.
Yeah. I mean, I think that sound effect really sums it up for me. Thank you for that final thought, John. Let's hear we've got a few more minutes. Let's hear from Jawei, if you have a final thought for us.
Yeah, sure. I'm thinking about what Richard said about the biopsychosocial model. That really inspired me a lot. It really helped me to understand human being as a dynamic system, and we have to take into kind of a lot of a flux of factors into our being, into our living. So we wanted to look into that a lot. And in terms of change, that ability and the willingness to embrace the fluidness or the fluidity of things, willing to bend the walls, willing to queer some of the ideology, I think that's a important thing to try and experiment in a way.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Richard, let's hear from you.
Hi, I think that's a really good point for me to make my final point. I'd really like to thank Joey for what she just said. I was genuinely about to leave this stream feeling like maybe I'd been a negative influence on it, and that was something that I really didn't want to happen. The only reason I'm a part of it is because I met you guys by chance at Hackney Wick Station, and I've been trying for a while to come to this Talkaoke thing, but due to my own ineptitude, had not been able to be a part of it. And I really wanted to be, because I think what you're doing in encouraging conversation between people who would never normally have conversations is an incredibly positive thing, and especially at this time. And I'd just like to end on that and just say that, guys, keep doing what you're doing. And if I can be any part of that, and especially a positive part of that, I'll be there.
Well, Richard, thank you. I mean, I think you were an incredibly positive part of tonight. So thank you for those words. That's really wonderful to hear.
Well, I'll add in for my part. I'm very glad that, Richard, you did turn up tonight, because you kept me in check and you've given us a great deal of wisdom.
I think we've heard from almost everyone. We have Katie, Mikey. It'd be great to hear from Eliza and maybe James, who I know came in a little later. But let's go with Katie first.
Thanks. So yeah, first of all, Richard, you were amazing. It was a pleasure listening to you, and I really hope to hear from you again. Because the insights were really brilliant. And to everyone, I shared on the chat, but I really just want to say it again, that as Darwin said, it's not the strongest who survive, but those most responsive to change. And, I really hope that as during the current change, everyone can find a way to swim in this fluid, so to say.
Oh, I love it. Bringing it back to fish. Thank you, Katie. Mikey, do you want to have your final thought?
So many thoughts. I mean, it's love. I'm talking about evolution. You know, I started off being the Talkaoke host, and Talkaoke kind of, and I'm probably still in that role, but it's nice just to see that the ship being steered and run by other people. I just want to say thanks to everyone. Part of that to Evie that picked it up, and yourself, Zoe, and Margot and Natalie. I don't believe Natalie's had a final thought.
Oh, yeah.
Rick talked with images, so we'll let the images do the talking. My favourite one of Rick's tonight was the flat Earth on the turtle. I would like to ask, what is this tortoise?
That's terrible. Did you guys get what has this taught us?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
if you sort of say, what is this? Sort of like,
what is this?
Tortoise. Anyway, that's why the new generation is taking over, and I just want to say thanks to everyone. It's been very stimulating. I won't sleep tonight because I'll be processing all these ideas.
Margot, yeah.
As my final thought, yeah, I thought tonight was really, really great, and I really thank Stella for sharing his poem as well. Just, you know, the grand scheme of things, I think that's brilliant. So.
Natalie, did you want to have a final thought through sound effects or actual words?
Yeah, I'll give a quick final thought. Completely irrelevant, but I think I like beer now.
Oh, well, that's a big revelation. She thinks she likes beer now. That's a round of applause for that. Round of applause for that. I'm conscious that we haven't heard from James or Eliza. Anyone want to jump in? Yeah, Eliza, come on in.
Okay, so I don't know if you can hear me.
You're a little quiet, but we can kind of hear you.
Okay. I'll try to be
That's
louder. Yeah. Okay. So it was my first time here and with you. And so I think this is the change for me because the participating in this is the change because I have to learn how to hear and speak in English. So that's why I'm starting to participate in the interesting way, learn English. And I'm happy that I have something new in my life because I'm new here in UK. So I need new people and new inspiration. So you are my change.
Oh, well, we're really happy to have you, and we hope you come back. We hope you feel comfortable participating in sound effects or whatever language you want, honestly. We're happy to have you. So thank you for coming, and thank you for that final thought. That was really brilliant. I think the last person we need to hear from is James.
Well, that's funny, isn't it? Well, I was really rather late arriving, so it's nice of you to even include my attendance in your report there.
Oh, we'd love to hear what you heard in the last final bits.
I'm famous for turning up late for Talkaoke, so it's not going to be a surprise to Mikey. But it's always a pleasure, and it sounds like I missed a bit of a corker, so maybe I'll get it on catch up.
Yep, I think that's what it is. What is it? ITV Plus2? I don't know.
We're going
live
out
on the interweb.
We are going out on Facebook.
It's never as fresh as the real stuff. It's never as fresh as the real stuff.
No.
But never mind. You can catch up.
Yeah, I think we'll be out
Get
there.
it while it's fresh.
Get it while it's
I would
fresh.
just say to anybody who hasn't had enough Talkaokes, there are some more coming up. They're a little bit more kind of specific. So if you're starved of Talkaoke already, you've got a chance this Saturday at 4:30 to join us at Cambridge Festival. We'll be talking about where do researchers and sciencey people get their ideas from.
Yeah, in a way that segues into this question about intelligence and creativity, because where does it come from?
Yeah, where does it come from? We will be pulling that apart and discussing that this Saturday, and then on Saturday, 3rd of April, we'll come back again at Cambridge Festival. We'll be talking about trust in science, and then of course for the sound effect of the X-Files. Just came out of nowhere. I don't know how it happened. And of course, Talkaoke is happening every month, although Kate would like to see it every week. Hell, every day, why not?
We're working on it.
We're training more people up so we can just pass on that mantle. But yes, that's it.
Thanks to everyone for such a great session and for being here and everything. And let's have some cool music to see us out.
If you're watching us on Facebook or YouTube, please comment, even if it's just to say, I'm here. What a load of crap. Anything. Just give us something. Yeah.
Danny commented a long time ago saying, I'm sorry, I can't join you.
Well, that's a comment. That's what we want. Anything.
Mikey, how do you spell crap?
Is this a gag?
Yes, I hope so.
John's laughing, so.
I very much enjoyed being with you.
Wonderful.
And thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Yeah, let's have some
Good night. Yes. Thanks, everyone.
I don't know who this guy is.